I was holding a piece of paper that weighed less than an ounce, but somehow it felt like it contained about 10 tons of pure, unadulterated audacity. It was a certified letter, the kind that requires a signature from a mailman who looks at you with pity because he knows he's handing you a headache. I stood there on my front porch, coffee in one hand, lukewarm now, thanks to the interruption, and this heavy cream-colored envelope in the other. The return address was embossed. That little raised texture that screams, "We spent your HOA dues on stationery instead of fixing the pothole on Elm Street." Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association was stamped in gold foil in the top left corner. Below it, in a font that I can only describe as passive-aggressive sans serif, was the name of the sender. Mrs. Patricia Higgins, President. I hadn't even opened it yet, and my blood pressure was already doing that thing where you can hear your own pulse in your ears. You know the sound? Whoosh, whoosh. It's the soundtrack of a man about to lose his absolute mind. I took a sip of the cold coffee, grimaced, and tore the envelope open with my teeth because I didn't have a free hand, and I was too annoyed to put the mug down. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. It was thick, heavy stock, expensive. I unfolded it and started to read, hoping it was just a generic newsletter about trash can placement or a reminder that Christmas lights have to be down by January 15th. It wasn't. "Dear Mr. Michael Henderson," it began. Formal. Cold. "It has come to the attention of the board that your property at 402 Maple Drive contains a drainage gradient that is essential to the hydrological integrity of the neighborhood's water management system." I stopped reading. Hydrological integrity? I'm a software engineer, not a hydrologist, but I know for a fact that my backyard is flatter than a pancake and hasn't seen standing water since the Great Flood of '98. Looked out at my lawn. It was pristine, green, dry. I went back to the letter. Due to recent concerns regarding potential subsurface erosion, the board, under the direction of the Architectural Control Committee, requires immediate and unfettered access to the rear of your property for inspection and ongoing monitoring. Effective immediately, you are instructed to remove the padlock from your rear gate and leave it unlatched between the hours of 8 o'clock a.m. and 6 o'clock p.m., Monday through Friday, to facilitate random compliance checks by authorized HOA representatives. Failure to comply will result in a daily fine of $150 and potential legal escalation. I lowered the letter. I looked at the street. It was a nice street. Trees, manicured lawns, birds chirping. It looked peaceful, but it was a lie. I was living in a war zone, and the first shot had just been fired by a woman whose hairstyle probably hadn't changed since the Reagan administration. Unfettered access, I whispered to myself, testing the words. They tasted like bile. Random compliance checks. I didn't buy this house for the granite countertops or the open-concept living room. I didn't buy it for the school district or the proximity to the highway. I bought this house for exactly one reason: the 6-foot, cedar plank privacy fence that surrounded the backyard. It was my fortress of solitude, my sanctuary. I work from home. I spend 8 hours a day staring at code that makes my eyes bleed. When I clock out, or when I take a break, I go into that backyard. I sit on my deck, I grill steaks. I sometimes just lay in the grass and stare at the clouds like a 5-year-old. It is the only place on earth where I don't have to answer to anyone. No bosses, no clients, and certainly not Patricia Higgins. I looked down the street toward the Higgins residence. It was 3 houses down on the left. A pristine, terrifyingly symmetrical 2-story colonial with a lawn that looked like it was cut with nail scissors. And there she was, Mrs. Higgins, She was standing on her own driveway, arms crossed, staring directly at me. It was like she had a radar for distress. She saw me holding the letter. She knew. She started walking toward me. Now, I'm a reasonable guy. I pay my taxes. I tip 20%. I hold doors open for people. But Mrs. Higgins tested the limits of my social contract. She was a small woman, maybe 5'2", but she carried herself with the authority of a 4-star general inspecting the troops. She wore a floral blouse that looked like a couch from 1984, and khaki pants that were ironed so sharply they could sever a limb. "Mr. Henderson," she called out when she was still 50 feet away. Her voice was shrill, the kind of tone that cuts through glass. "I see you received our correspondence." I didn't move. I just waited on my porch, gripping the letter. "I did, Mrs. Higgins. Just now." She reached the edge of my driveway and stopped, respecting the property line only because stepping over it uninvited wasn't part of her current power play. "Excellent. We've been very worried about the drainage. Very worried." "Drainage," I repeated flatly. "Patricia, it hasn't rained in 3 weeks. My yard is bone dry. There is no drainage issue." She tutted. She actually tutted at me, shaking her head like I was a toddler trying to explain quantum physics. "Subsurface, Mr. Henderson, subsurface. Just because you can't see the water doesn't mean it isn't wreaking havoc on the foundation of our community. The integrity of the soil is paramount." "And for this invisible water," I said, stepping off the porch and walking down the driveway to meet her, "you need me to unlock my gate? Permanently?" "During business hours," she corrected, tapping a pen against a clipboard I hadn't noticed she was holding. "For spot checks. The board needs to be able to access the easement to measure moisture levels." "There is no easement in my backyard," I said. "I checked the survey when I bought the place 2 years ago. My property line goes to the back fence. The utility easement is in the front, by the sidewalk." Her eyes narrowed. They were small, beady eyes, magnified slightly by her glasses. "The HOA bylaws, Section 4, Paragraph C, state that the board reserves the right to access any property for emergency maintenance or to prevent community blight. Erosion is blight, Mr. Henderson." "It's not an emergency if you're scheduling it between 8 and 6, Monday through Friday," I countered. "That's a job. You're asking to turn my backyard into a public park for the HOA board." She straightened up, puffing out her chest. "We are volunteers, Mr. Henderson. We do this for the good of the neighborhood. And frankly, your gate being locked is a safety hazard. What if there was a fire? How would the fire department access the rear of the home?" "They have axes, Patricia, big ones. They don't need the combination to my master. Lock." She didn't like that. Her lips pursed into a thin line, disappearing entirely. "The lock comes off by Monday morning, or the fines begin, and I will be checking. Personally." "You're telling me," I said, stepping a little closer, lowering my voice to that dangerous level of calm, "that you intend to enter my private property without my permission whenever you feel like it?" "It is not private property when it concerns the association," she snapped. "You signed the covenants when you bought the house. We have the authority. If you obstruct an inspection, we can place a lien on your home. Do not test me, Michael. I have been on this board for 20 years. I have seen residents come and go. The ones who cooperate stay. The ones who don't." She let the sentence hang in the air, a threat wrapped in polyester. "The ones who don't, what?" I asked. "Disappear into the subsurface water?" "They find that living here becomes difficult," she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just spotted a seal with a limp. "Monday, 8:00 a.m. Gate unlocked. Have a blessed day." She turned on her heel and marched away, her sensible shoes clicking on the pavement. I watched her go, the rage simmering in my gut like a pot of chili left on the stove too long. I looked at the letter again. 150 a day. That was over $4,000 a month. It was extortion. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. It was about the fact that she wanted to be able to waltz into my backyard, probably to critique my lawn furniture or complain that my grass was a millimeter too high, and use drainage as the excuse. I walked back into my house and slammed the front door. The sound echoed through the hallway. I went straight to the kitchen, poured the cold coffee down the sink, and pulled a beer out of the fridge. It was 10 o'clock a.m. on a Saturday. I didn't care. I sat at the kitchen island and stared at my phone. I needed a plan. I couldn't fight the HOA on their own turf. They had the lawyers, the bylaws, and the sheer boredom-fueled determination of retired people with nothing better to do. If I fought them in court, I'd go broke before they ran out of meetings. I needed a loophole. I needed something that superseded the HOA bylaws. I scrolled through my contacts and found Dave, lawyer, sort of. Dave was an old college buddy. He wasn't a property lawyer, he was a corporate contract guy, but he knew how to read the fine print better than anyone I knew. I hit dial. "Mikey," Dave answered on the second ring. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you finally decide to sue that pizza place for putting pineapple on your order?" "Worse," I said. "HOA." "Oh, gross. Hang up. Sell the house. Move to a van down by the river. It's the only way." "I'm serious, Dave. The president, this lady Mrs. Higgins, she's claiming she needs unfettered access to my backyard for drainage inspections. She wants me to leave the gate. Unlocked all day, every day. She threatened to fine me $150 a day if I don't." Dave let out a low whistle. "Drainage, huh? That's the classic catch-all. It's hard to disprove without hiring your own geological surveyor. What do the bylaws say?" She quoted some section about emergency maintenance and preventing blight. "Yeah, standard boilerplate. Here's the thing, Mike. If you signed the CCNRs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, you technically gave them permission to enter for specific reasons. If you lock them out, you are technically in breach of contract. So I'm screwed? I just have to let this lady wander around my yard while I'm trying to work?" "Not necessarily," Dave said. I could hear him typing on a keyboard in the background. "See, there's a difference between access and liability. If they demand access, they assume the liability for entering the property. But if there is a known hazard on the property, and you have adequately warned them, the liability gets tricky. It shifts. If the property is deemed hazardous for entry due to, say, construction or security measures, they can't just waltz in without assuming the risk of bodily harm." "Security measures?" I asked. "Like a dog?" "A dog is good," Dave said. "But dogs are tricky. If a dog bites someone, even an intruder, depending on the state, you can be put down. I mean the dog, not you. And you could be sued. But if it's not a pet? If it's livestock? Or a security animal that isn't classified as a domestic companion?" "Livestock?" I looked out the window at my manicured suburban lawn. "Dave, I live in a subdivision. I can't have cows." "Check your zoning," Dave said. "Not the HOA rules, the city zoning. Sometimes the city ordinances supersede the HOA restrictions, especially regarding sustainability or urban farming. A lot of places passed laws recently allowing chickens or other fowl to encourage self-sufficiency. If the city says you can have them, the HOA usually has a harder time banning them outright, especially if they aren't permanent structures." "Fowl," I repeated. Yeah, chickens, ducks, geese. Geese? Geese are the ultimate security system, Mike. The Romans used them to guard the capital. They are territorial, loud, and mean as hell. And here's the kicker. In many jurisdictions, if you post "beware of animal" signs and the person enters anyway, especially if they are not a police officer with a warrant, you are indemnified. You told them it was dangerous. They entered. Their problem. A slow smile spread across my face. It felt evil. It felt wonderful. Geese. Just check the zoning first, Dave warned. And Mike, don't get the nice ones. If you're going to do this, you need the ones that woke up and chose violence. I hung up the phone and immediately opened my laptop. I went to the city's municipal code website. I searched for residential poultry. There it was. Ordinance 44B, residents in Zone So, R2, low-density residential, are permitted to keep up to six fowl for the purpose of egg production or pest control, provided they are contained within a fenced area and have access to adequate shelter. I checked the HOA bylaws. I had a digital copy saved from when I bought the house. I Control F'd for poultry. Nothing. Livestock. Nothing. Animals. Section 9. Pets. Residents are limited to three domestic dogs or cats. No exotic animals such as tigers, monkeys, or venomous snakes. No mention of birds. No mention of fowl. They had forgotten to ban farm birds because who in their right mind would put farm birds in a $500,000 suburban home? Me. I was that person. I grabbed my keys. I didn't even finish my beer. I had work to do. I drove about 45 minutes out of the city, past the endless strip malls and gas stations, until the roads turned from asphalt to gravel. I was looking for a place called Sunnyside Hatchery and Farm, which I had. Found on Craigslist. The ad simply said, "We sell birds, all kinds, cash only." I pulled my SUV up to a dilapidated barn. A man in overalls and a hat that looked like it had been chewed on by a goat walked out to meet me. He was wiping his hands on a rag that was greasier than the engine block of a '72 Ford. "Help you?" he grunted. "I'm looking for geese," I said. "I need 6 of them." He looked me up and down. I was wearing a polo shirt and boat shoes. I looked like exactly what I was, a suburbanite lost in the country. "You want 'em for eating, or eggs?" "Guard duty," I said. The farmer, let's call him Farmer Dan, stopped wiping his hands. He squinted at me. A slow grin revealed a missing premolar. "Guard duty, huh? You got a fox problem?" "I have a neighbor problem," I corrected. "I need something that scares people. Something that makes a grown woman question her life choices." Dan laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound. "Well, son, you don't want the pilgrims. They're too heavy. You want the Chinese geese, the Weider geese. See them over there?" He pointed to a pen near the side of the barn. Inside were about a dozen white and brown birds with large knobs on their beaks. They were standing perfectly still, watching us. They didn't look like birds. They looked like a street gang assessing a tourist. "Are they mean?" I asked. "Mean?" Dan spat on the ground. "See that big white one in the middle? I call him Lucifer. Last week he chased a FedEx truck 3 miles down the road. He don't bite to eat. He bites because he hates you personally. These birds are loud, they're territorial, and they have zero fear of God or man." "Perfect," I said. "I'll take Lucifer, and 5 of his angriest friends." "You got a cage?" "I have the back of my Ford Explorer." Dan shook his head. "You're gonna regret that. But all right, $50 a bird." "Sold." The next hour was a blur of feathers, honking, and sheer physical struggle. Catching Lucifer was like trying to wrestle a pillowcase full of bricks that could also pinch you. Dan grabbed him by the neck, gently but firmly, and shoved him into a large dog crate I had bought on the way over. Lucifer hissed. It wasn't a quack, it was a hiss, like a leaking gas pipe. We managed to get 6 of them loaded. Lucifer, a gray one I named Attila, a spotted one I named Brutus, 2 identical noisy ones I named Karen and Ripper, and finally, the smallest, but arguably the craziest one, Fluffy. Fluffy had a crazy look in his eye. He kept pecking the metal bars of the cage, testing them. "Good luck," Dan said as I closed the trunk. "You remember they eat grass and bugs, and souls, mostly grass, though." The drive home was a nightmare. The smell hit me about 5 miles in, a mix of wet bird and barnyard funk. The noise was worse. It sounded like I was transporting a symphonic orchestra tuning their instruments in a wind tunnel. Honk, hiss, screech! I pulled into my driveway at around 2:00 p.m. I looked at Mrs. Higgins' house. Her curtains twitched. She was watching. Good. I backed the SUV right up to the gate. I didn't want to release them yet. I needed to prep the kill zone. I left them in the car, with the windows cracked and the AC running. I'm not a monster to the animals, just to my neighbors, and called a contractor I had used for my deck. "Tony!" I yelled into the phone over the sound of the muffled honking from the car. "I have a rush job. Triple rate if you can come out today." "Mike, is everything okay? You sound manic." "I'm fantastic, Tony. I need you to reinforce my fence. I need it to be escape-proof, and I need you to mount some signs. Heavy-duty signs." "What kind of signs?" "I'll text you the design. Just bring your drill and some long bolts. We're building a fortress." Tony arrived an hour later. He was a big guy, seen it all, done it all. But when he saw the crates in the back of my car, he took a step back. "Are those geese?" "Chinese. Geese," I corrected. "Security personnel." Tony looked at me, then at the birds, then back at me. "Mike, did you lose your job? Is this a meth thing? You can tell me." "It's a Higgins thing," I said. Tony's face darkened. He had done work on Higgins' house before. He knew. "Say no more. Where do you want the signs?" I had printed them at the local office supply store on rigid aluminum blanks. Bright red background. Bold white text. "Warning. Biological security system in place. Aggressive waterfowl. Enter at your own risk. Not responsible for injury or loss of dignity." "I want one every 10 feet, I said. "And one right on the gate. Bolt it through the wood so it can't be unscrewed from the outside." Tony went to work. He reinforced the bottom of the fence with chicken wire so the geese couldn't squeeze under. He checked the latches. He mounted the signs. The zip-zip of his impact driver was the music of my revenge. By 5:00 p.m., the yard was ready. We had also assembled a quick coop, a prefab shed I had in the garage that we converted into a shelter with straw bedding. "All right," Tony said, packing up his tools. "I'm leaving. I do not want to be here when you let the Krakens out." "Smart man," I said. I paid him in cash and added a generous tip. "Mike," Tony said, leaning out the window of his truck. "Seriously, don't turn your back on them." "I won't." I waited until Tony left. Then I opened the back of my SUV. I carried the crates, one by one, into the backyard. I set them in a semicircle facing the house. I took a deep breath. I climbed onto the deck, safely behind the railing. I reached down with a broom handle and unlatched the first crate. Lucifer burst out. He didn't run. He strutted. He spread his wings, which were surprisingly large, and let out a honk that shook the leaves off the oak tree. He looked around, saw the green grass, saw the pool, saw the space. He claimed it instantly. I released the others. Attila, Brutus, Karen, Ripper, and Fluffy joined the formation. They started grazing immediately, ripping up weeds with a violence that was impressive. Then, Lucifer looked up. He saw me on the deck. He tilted his head. He hissed. Yeah, I'm the landlord," I said to the bird. "You work for me. Your job is to eat bugs and terrorize the lady with the clipboard. Got it?" Lucifer honked. I took that as a yes. I walked to the back gate. I unlocked the heavy padlock that I usually kept on it. I removed the chain. I left the gate secured only by the standard gravity latch. Anyone could open it from the outside by just lifting the lever. But right at eye level, bold and red, was the sign, "Danger, aggressive geese." I went inside, made myself a sandwich, and sat by the window. I sent an email to Mrs. Higgins and the HOA board. Subject: Compliance with access request, dear. Mrs. Higgins, per your demand, the padlock has been removed from the rear gate of 402 Maple Drive to facilitate your drainage. Inspections. Access is now available. Please be advised that the property is currently patrolled by free-range security poultry as permitted by City Ordinance 44B. Please observe all posted safety warnings on the perimeter fence. The homeowner assumes no liability for interactions with the animals should you choose to enter the property. Regards, Mike Henderson. I hit send. I checked the time. It was Saturday evening. She wouldn't come tonight. She would come Monday morning. She was a stickler for the schedule. Sunday was a training day. I spent the day on the deck tossing lettuce to the squad. I learned quickly that they could be bribed, but not tamed. If I had lettuce, I was a god. If I didn't, I was a target. This was perfect. Higgins wouldn't have lettuce. Monday morning arrived. The sun rose. The birds were already awake, honking softly as they patrolled the perimeter. I could see their little webbed feet pacing back and forth along the fence line. They knew the territory. Now, this was their kingdom. At 7:55 a.m., I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. I set up my camera on a tripod in the kitchen, pointed directly at the backyard gate. I also pulled up the feed from the Ring floodlight camera I had mounted above the shed. At 8:01 a.m., I saw her. Mrs. Higgins. She wasn't alone. She had a young guy with her, maybe 20 years old, wearing a polo shirt that was too big for him. He was holding a tape measure and looking miserable. An intern. Poor kid. They walked down the side path of my house. I watched on the monitor. Higgins was marching with purpose. She reached the gate. She saw the bright red sign. She stopped. She read it. She adjusted her glasses. She turned to the intern and said something. The audio on the camera picked it up faintly. Ridiculous. Probably a bluff. He just wants to scare us. Open it, Kevin. Kevin looked at the sign. Aggressive waterfowl. He looked at Higgins. Mrs. Higgins, it says enter at own risk. Maybe we should knock. Nonsense, she snapped. We have the authority. Open the gate. I need to measure the gradient near the back flower bed. Kevin, poor, sweet, doomed Kevin, reached out. He lifted the latch. I took a sip of coffee. The gate swung inward. For a split second, nothing happened. The yard looked empty. The geese were near the shed, out of the direct line of sight. Higgins stepped in. See? Nothing. Just theatrics. She took 3 steps onto the grass. Honk! It came from the left. A sound like a trumpet blown by a demon. Lucifer exploded from behind the rhododendron bush. He didn't fly. He ran, his neck extended parallel to the ground, wings spread wide to make himself look like a feathered B-52 bomber. Higgins froze. What in the... Then the others came. Fluffy and Ripper flanked her from the right. It was a tactical ambush. I swear they had practiced this. "Oh my God!" Kevin screamed. He was still standing in the gateway. Lucifer reached Higgins. He didn't peck her. He went for intimidation. He rushed her shins, hissing loudly, flapping his wings against her legs. The force of a goose-wing slap is surprisingly strong. It's like being hit with a heavy pillowcase. "Get away! Shoo! Shoo!" Higgins shrieked, swinging her clipboard wildly. This was a mistake. Aggression begets aggression. Attila saw the clipboard as a weapon. He launched himself into the air, hopping up to chest height, snapping his beak. "Ah!" Higgins did a clumsy pirouette, trying to fend them off. She dropped the clipboard. Kevin, in a moment of pure survival instinct, backed out of the gate and slammed it shut. "Kevin, open the gate!" Higgins screamed. She was trapped inside. With them. I almost choked on my coffee. I hadn't anticipated the intern locking her in. It was better than I could have dreamed. Higgins was now running, actually running, in a tight circle, pursued by 6 angry geese. She scrambled toward the only high ground available, my patio table on the lower deck. She hiked up her khaki pants and clambered onto the table, knocking over a citronella candle. The geese surrounded the table. They paced around it, honking rhythmically. It was a siege. "Help! Help! I'm being attacked by chickens!" she screamed at my back door. I unlocked the sliding glass door and stepped out, holding my mug. I stayed behind the screen door, though. Safety first. "Morning, Patricia," I called out cheerfully. "They're geese, actually. Chinese watch geese. Lovely breed." Call them off this instant," she shrieked, her hair coming undone. Lucifer nipped at the heel of her sensible shoe dangling off the table. She pulled her legs up, hugging her knees. "I can't really control them," I said, taking a sip. "They're free-range, very independent. Did you not see the sign?" "I am going to sue you for everything you own," she yelled, her face beet red. "I am the president of the association." "And they are the presidents of the backyard," I said. "Look, if you stay very still, they might lose interest in about 20 minutes. Or you can make a run for the gate. Kevin seems to have abandoned you." I pointed to the gate. Kevin was gone. He was probably halfway to his car. "I am calling the police!" she screamed, fumbling for her phone in her pocket. "Go ahead," I said. "I'll wait." It took 12 minutes for the police to arrive. I know this because I timed it. During those 12 minutes, Mrs. Higgins remained perched on my patio table, clutching her knees, while the geese settled into a comfortable loafing formation around the base. They weren't attacking anymore. They were just waiting. It was psychological warfare. Every time she tried to shift her weight or lower a foot, Fluffy would stretch his neck out and let out a low, guttural hiss that sounded like a tire deflating, and she would scramble back to the center of the table. I stayed inside, finishing my coffee, watching the scene unfold like a slow-motion nature documentary where the predator is a waterfowl and the prey is a middle-aged woman in khakis. When the squad car pulled up, I saw the flashing lights reflect off my living room window. I sighed, put my mug in the dishwasher, and walked out the front door to meet them. I wanted to control the narrative before they saw the hostage situation in the backyard. 2 officers stepped out. One was a burly guy who looked like he'd been on the force for 20 years, Officer Miller, according to his badge. The other was younger, looking a bit confused by the dispatch call. "Sir," Officer Miller said, hitching his belt. "We got a call about, well, the dispatcher said, a woman being eaten by dinosaurs. We assumed that was a typo." "Ah, yes," I said, putting on my best concerned neighbor face. "That would be Mrs. Higgins. She's in the backyard. She's indisposed." "Is she injured?" the younger officer asked, hand resting instinctively near his holster. "Only her pride. She..." said. "And maybe her vocal cords. She's been screaming for a while. Come on back, but please, watch your step, and read the signs." I led them down the side path. I stopped at the gate. I pointed to the red sign. "Danger. Aggressive geese. Enter at own risk." Miller read it out loud. "Aggressive geese?" He looked at me, one eyebrow raised. "Security system," I explained. "City Ordinance 44B. They're fully legal." We walked to the gate. I could hear Higgins yelling, "Officer, help! Shoot them! Shoot them all!" Miller peered through the slats of the fence. He saw Higgins on the table. He saw the 6 geese sitting calmly in the grass. He looked back at me. He had to bite the inside of his cheek to stop from laughing. I saw it. "Ma'am," Miller called out. "They are monsters!" Higgins shrieked. "I am trapped! That man set a trap for me! Arrest him!" "Sir," Miller said to me, "can you call off your birds?" "I can try," I said. "But they don't speak English. They speak violence." I opened the gate. The geese stood up instantly, necks craning. "Hey, Lucifer, back off!" I yelled, clapping my hands. Lucifer looked at me, then at the cops. He seemed to calculate the odds. He let out a honk that sounded suspiciously like "whatever," and waddled toward the shed. The others followed, albeit reluctantly. Fluffy gave Higgins one last side eye before retreating. Miller walked into the yard, keeping a wary eye on the shed. He helped Mrs. Higgins down from the table. She was trembling. Her pants were covered in dirt from her shoes. Her hair was a bird's nest of its own. "Thank God," she panted, clutching Miller's arm. "You need to arrest him. Assault with a deadly weapon. Reckless endangerment. Kidnapping." "Kidnapping?" Miller asked. "Ma'am, did he force you into the yard?" "Well, no," she stammered. "I entered to perform an inspection, as is my right as HOA president." "Did you unlock the gate?" Miller asked, pulling out a notepad. It was unlocked. He left it unlocked to lure me in. "And did you see the sign?" Miller pointed to the bright red metal square on the gate post. She hesitated. I thought it was a joke, a decoration." "Ma'am," Miller sighed, closing his notepad, "you entered a fenced property marked with a warning sign. The homeowner was not present to escort you. Technically, you were trespassing." "Trespassing?" Her voice went up 3 octaves. "I am the president of the association. I have an easement right." "Show me the easement papers," Miller said. I don't have them on me. They are in the bylaws." "Then this is a civil matter," Miller concluded. "We can't arrest a man because you walked into his yard and got spooked by his pets." "They aren't pets!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the shed where Lucifer was now watching us from the doorway, like a bouncer at a club. "They are wild beasts." "They are livestock," I interjected helpfully. "Registered poultry." Miller turned to me. "Sir, keep your birds contained. If they get out on the street, we have a problem. As long as they stay behind this fence, and you have those signs up, you're within the law." He turned back to Higgins. "Ma'am, I suggest you go home and wash up, and maybe stay out of this gentleman's yard." Higgins looked like she was going to explode. Her face cycled through purple, red, and a sickly pale color. She straightened her blouse, glared at me with the intensity of 1,000 burning suns, and marched past the officers. "This isn't over, Michael," she hissed as she passed me. "You will hear from our lawyers. You will hear from the city. I will have those birds roasted by Friday." "I like mine with a nice orange glaze," I called after her. The officers escorted her out. Miller lingered for a second. "Nice setup," he muttered. "My wife wants chickens. I might tell her about the geese. They're great listeners, I said. When they left, I locked the gate. I walked over to the shed. Lucifer came out and nudged my leg with his beak. It wasn't aggressive. It was a fist bump. I gave him a handful of dried mealworms. "Good job, boys," I whispered. "Phase 1 complete." The peace lasted exactly 48 hours. On Wednesday, the fine arrived. It wasn't a certified letter this time. It was taped to my front door. Violation notice. Offense: keeping of unauthorized livestock nuisance animals. Offense: installation of non-approved signage. Fine: $500. Remedy: immediate removal of animals and signage. I didn't even blink. I scanned the document and emailed it to Dave, my lawyer friend. Dave replied 3 minutes later. "Ignore it. The bylaws don't define nuisance animals specifically enough to override the city ordinance, and the signs are required by liability law, which trumps HOA aesthetics. If they try to foreclose, we sue for harassment. But keep the camera rolling. They're going to escalate." Dave was a prophet. Higgins realized she couldn't come in herself. She was too scared. And she couldn't send the police. So, she went for the mercenaries. On Friday morning, a white van pulled up. Green Thumb Landscaping and Maintenance was stenciled on the side. I didn't have a contract with Green Thumb. The HOA did. I was in my office, which overlooks the front yard, when I saw 3 guys get out. They were big guys. They looked like they wrestled tree stumps for fun. They were carrying weed whackers, leaf blowers, and a very large ladder. Higgins was nowhere to be seen. She was commanding from the rear, like a coward general. I watched as they walked around to the side gate. I switched my monitor to the backyard camera feed. The lead guy, a man with a beard that took up half his face, reached for the latch. He saw the sign. He paused. He turned to his buddy and laughed. He actually laughed. He mimicked a quacking motion with his hand. "Oh, you poor fool." He opened the gate. "Hello? Landscaping?" he shouted. No answer. The yard was silent. The geese were in the bunker, the shed. They had learned. They didn't patrol constantly. They waited for the breach. The 3 men walked in. They started their equipment. The roar of the leaf blowers was deafening. This was an invasion of noise. The vibration must have triggered something primal in Lucifer. I saw movement in the dark doorway of the shed. The lead landscaper turned his back to the shed to blow some leaves near the fence. He didn't see the white missile launch itself from the darkness. Lucifer didn't hiss this time. He just attacked. He hit the guy in the back of the knees with his full body weight, flapping his wings violently. The guy yelped, spun around, and tripped over his own leaf blower. He went down hard. Then the rest of the squad deployed. It was chaos. Absolute, beautiful chaos. The landscapers were armed with power tools, but they were afraid to use them on animals. You can't just weed whack a goose. It's frowned upon. So they were trying to fend them off with their boots and the plastic nozzles of the blowers. But the geese were fast. They were low to the ground. They were nipping at ankles, grabbing pant legs, and flapping their wings in faces. A goose wing to the face stings. It's like getting slapped with a dense rubber mat. One guy dropped his weed whacker and climbed the fence. He literally scaled a 6-foot cedar fence in under 3 seconds. That's Olympic-level athleticism, inspired by pure terror. The third guy, the one with the ladder, tried to use it as a shield. He held it up, backing away. "Back! Get back!" he yelled. Attila and Brutus weren't intimidated by aluminum. They rushed him, honking in stereo. The guy panicked, swung the ladder, hit the bird feeder, sending seeds everywhere, and then abandoned the ladder entirely to sprint for the gate. The lead guy, still on the ground, managed to scramble to his feet. He looked like he'd been in a bar fight with a tornado. He bolted. They all cleared the gate in record time. The last guy didn't even bother to latch it. I walked out to the driveway just as they were throwing their gear into the van. "Everything okay, fellas?" I asked, leaning against my car. The bearded guy looked at me. His eyes were wide. You got demons in there, man. Not birds. Demons." "They're just particular about their grass," I said. "Did Mrs. Higgins send you?" "Yeah," he spat. "She said it was a routine trim. She didn't say anything about guard raptors. I quit. I'm not doing this house. I don't care what she pays." He slammed the van door. They peeled out, tires screeching. I went back inside and saved the video footage. I titled the file, Battle of Green Thumb at MP4. The following week, the atmosphere in the neighborhood changed. People started walking on the other side of the street when they passed my house. I saw neighbors pointing at the "Enter at Own Risk" signs. I had become the local urban legend, the crazy guy with the attack geese. But I still needed actual work done. My pool pump had been making a weird noise, and I couldn't put it off. I called a local pool guy, a guy named Steve who ran his own one-man operation. When Steve arrived, he saw the signs. He didn't laugh. He called me from the driveway. "Hey, Mike," Steve said on the phone. "I'm outside. The sign says aggressive geese. Am I gonna die if I come in?" "Stay there," I said. "I'll come get you." I walked out with a large Ziploc bag full of frozen peas. "Here's the deal, Steve," I said, handing him the bag. "They are mercenaries. They can be bought. When you go in, throw a handful of these to the left. While they eat, you walk to the pool equipment on the right. If one approaches you, do not run. Just offer more peas. It's a toll." Steve looked at the bag, then at me. "Okay, cool. I like peas." We walked in. Steve was calm. He didn't have the stench of fear or entitlement on him. He tossed the piece of the squad, swarmed the green treats, completely ignoring him. "Nice birds," Steve said, kneeling down by the pump. "Chinese geese, right? My grandma had these, loud as hell." "They get the job done," I said. Steve fixed the pump in 20 minutes. He even hand-fed Fluffy a few peas before he left. "You know," Steve said as he packed up, "that lady down the street, the one with the hair helmet? She stopped me on the way in. Asked me if I felt unsafe working here. Asked if I wanted to file a report." "What did you say?" "I told her the birds were nicer than some of my human customers. She didn't like that." I laughed. "Thanks, Steve." This proved a crucial point. The geese weren't mindless killing machines. They were discerning judges of character. They hated intruders. They hated aggression. And they really, really hated Mrs. Higgins. We were now 3 weeks into the standoff. The grass in the backyard was getting long, but the geese kept the weeds down. I didn't care. I was enjoying the solitude. But I knew the final boss battle was coming. Higgins had gone quiet. That meant she was plotting. The blow fell on a Tuesday. I was working on a particularly nasty piece of code when my doorbell rang. Not the frantic ringing of a delivery guy, but the authoritative press and hold of someone who expects to be obeyed. I checked the front door camera. It was Higgins. But she wasn't alone. She had a man with her wearing a city uniform. A badge hung around his neck. City Code Enforcement. And behind them was a guy in a locksmith van. This was it. The nuclear option. I opened the door. "Mr. Henderson?" Higgins said. She was smiling. It was a terrifying, triumphant smile. "This is Officer Davis from City Code Enforcement, and this is Mr. Lowry, a licensed locksmith." "Can I help you?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "We are here to execute an emergency access order," Officer Davis said. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been nagged into submission. "We have a report of a code violation regarding unpermitted structures and sanitation hazards in the rear of the property. The shed and the waste." "The shed is under 120 square feet," I said. "No permit needed. And the waste is fertilizer." "We need to verify that," Davis said. "And since you have refused entry to the HOA, the city is stepping in. We have the authority to remove locks to access the property for inspection." "And the animals?" I asked. "Animal control is on their way," Higgins said, her eyes gleaming, "to impound the dangerous beasts." "They're 20 minutes out," Davis corrected, "but we need to start the inspection now. I have a tight schedule." "I wouldn't go in there without animal control, Dave," I said, using his first name from his badge to throw him off. "It's Officer Davis, and I've handled dogs before. Open the gate, or the locksmith will do it, and we will bill you for the service." I looked at the locksmith. He was a young guy, looking at his phone, completely uninterested in the politics of this suburban war. "Fine," I said. "I'll unlock it. But I am formally stating that I am under duress, and I am warning you again. The geese are loose, they are territorial, and they do not respect city badges." "Just open it," Higgins snapped. I walked them around the side. I keyed the padlock I had put back on, just to annoy her. I removed the chain. "After you," I said, stepping back. "Officer Davis, please proceed," Higgins commanded. She stood behind him, using him as a human shield. Davis opened the gate. He stepped in. The yard was quiet. Too quiet. "See?" Higgins said, pushing past him to get a better look. "They're probably hiding. Cowardly things." They walked toward the shed. The locksmith stayed by the gate. Smart man. I pulled out my phone and started recording. As they reached the middle of the lawn, roughly 20 feet from safety, the trap sprung. But it wasn't just a charge this time. It was a pincer movement. Lucifer and Attila came from behind the shed, but Fluffy, Karen, Ripper, and Brutus came from under the deck, cutting off the retreat to the gate. They had been flanked. "Oh, crap," Davis said. Lucifer let out a honk that sounded like a war horn. The charge began. Davis, to his credit, tried to stand his ground. He put his hands out. Hey, go back!" Lucifer didn't care about hand signals. He flew at Davis, hitting him in the chest. Davis stumbled back, tripping over a molehill. He went down. Higgins screamed. "Do something!" She turned to run back to the gate, but Fluffy was there. Fluffy, the smallest and meanest, lowered his head and hissed, spreading his wings. He looked like a cobra with feathers. Higgins froze. She looked left. She looked right. She saw the open sliding glass door to my house, which I had locked the screen on. She saw the gate, blocked by geese. She saw the shed. She panicked. "Get them away! Get them away!" she shrieked, dancing a jig as Attila nipped at her ankles. Davis scrambled up, his uniform grass-stained. "Ma'am, move toward the gate." "I can't!" The locksmith, watching this from the safety of the driveway, looked at me. "Do you want me to do something?" "Are you charging me by the hour?" I asked. "Yeah." "Then just watch." Higgins made a break for it. She tried to skirt around the pool. This was a tactical error. Wet concrete is slippery, and panic makes you clumsy. Ripper chased her. She looked back, screamed, "Get away!" slipped on a patch of water near the deep end, and Splash! It was a glorious sound, a heavy, rhythmic kaploosh that resonated through the neighborhood. Mrs. Patricia Higgins, HOA president, arbiter of drainage, was now fully submerged in the chlorinated waters of 402 Maple Drive. The geese stopped at the water's edge. They honked in triumph. They knew water was their element, but they didn't need to go in. The victory was already won. Davis stood there, brushing dirt off his pants, looking at Higgins bobbing in the pool. Her hair helmet was deflated. Her glasses were crooked. She was sputtering. I am going to... She gargled water. Officer Davis, I called out from the driveway. Would you like to inspect the shed now, or would you like to help the lady out of the pool? Davis looked at the geese, who were now doing a victory lap around the pool deck. He looked at Higgins. He looked at me. Inspection canceled due to unsafe environment, Davis muttered. He turned around and walked out the gate, giving the geese a wide berth. I walked to the edge of the pool. The geese parted for me like the Red Sea. I extended a pool skimmer pole to Mrs. Higgins. Need a hand, Patricia? She stared at me. If looks could kill, I would have been vaporized on the spot. She grabbed the pole. I pulled her to the stairs. She climbed out, dripping, shivering, defeated. She walked to the gate, squelching with every step. She didn't say a word. She just walked past the locksmith, past the city officer, and down the street to her house. I looked at the geese. Lucifer let out a soft honk. Good boy, I said. The aftermath was swift and brutal, but not for me. My video of the splash didn't go public. I'm not that cruel. But the story spread. The locksmith told the mailman told the neighbors, the city officer told everyone at City Hall. Animal control never showed up. Apparently, Officer Davis canceled the call, listing the reason as homeowner-compliant complainant fell in pool. 2 days later, there was an emergency HOA meeting. I attended. I brought a plate of cookies. The board voted 4-1 to remove Mrs. Higgins as president, citing conduct unbecoming and creating unnecessary liability for the association. The only vote against removal was Higgins herself. The new president was a guy named Bob from down the street. Bob liked beer and hated meetings. Mike, Bob said to me after the meeting. Keep the geese, just maybe put a lock on the gate? Done, I said. I kept the geese for another year. They became neighborhood mascots. Kids would come by the fence, safely, to throw them peas. The enter at own risk signs stayed up, but they became less of a warning and more of a tourist attraction. Eventually, I moved. I sold the house to a young couple who wanted to start a family. They asked about the coop. What was this for? The wife asked. Security, I said. The best security system money could buy. I took the geese with me. I bought a place further out, with 5 acres and a pond. No HOA, no neighbors for a mile. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my new porch, watching Lucifer chase a deer off the property, I think about Mrs. Higgins. I wonder if she ever checks the drainage anymore. I wonder if she flinches when she hears a honk. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. Revenge is a dish best served with 6 angry birds and a bag of frozen peas.